I'm Dan Sullivan with the Pennsylvania Fair Tax Coalition. We've just had the 7th victory in taxes in the past 12 years. I'd like to talk a little bit about how we got Pittsburgh to reduce the wage tax and how we also got them to put most of the increase on land instead of on the conventional property tax. This is also going to be about the work we did previous to this particular battle that set the stage for it, and what we're going to have to do if we want to continue to have victories in the city and expand on the victories we've had.
I would like to welcome everyone. I would like to welcome everyone to City Council's 1989 tax hearing, and I would like a little silence, please.
On December 7th, 1989, Pittsburgh City Council convened to hear Mayor Masloff defend her tax swap proposal before an unruly crowd of more than 300 irate senior citizens. When the mayor announced her plan 3 weeks earlier, major players in Pittsburgh real estate blasted the proposal, making inflammatory statements about its impact on senior citizens. The tone of this hearing is largely a product of those statements.
Point of order. I'm only going to say this once. I'm only going to say this once. I would ask each and every person in the room to offer the dignity and respect to the mayor and any other speaker that comes to the microphone. We do not want any yelling or screaming. This council is here not for that today, but to listen to all of you. So please, permit each and every person to speak without interruption. Good morning.
Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the council, I come here today as a senior citizen myself. Can't you hear me? I come here today. Is that better? Okay, I don't want you to miss any of this. I come here today as a senior citizen myself. And I know better than anyone else about the financial burden we face. But I also know that if we don't attract young people and young families like your sons and daughters and like my daughter to this city, the tax burden is going to fall more and more on us older folks who will be left behind to pay more taxes and receive less in services. That is why we must cut the wage tax now so that we don't drive new residents out of the city. And this is why I have made the tax proposal that I am asking you to support. First, be aware that large downtown property holders will shoulder a greater share, up to 40%, of the cost of services to the neediest among us. If your house is worth about $30,000, the additional cost to you will be about $6 a month. This tax swap sends the following message to the working families who are the key to the future of our city. We want to tell them that if you are here, stay. If you are not, please come and join us. We must compete, and we must make the city more and more attractive for wage earners. We no longer can let unfair wage tax deny us the company of young families. They represent our future. Many of those young families won't be speaking here today. They have already expressed their opinion with their feet. They've left the city, and we can't ignore their absence. But I can't ignore the pleas of these senior citizens who fear the sting of this tax sting because they are on a fixed income. We will listen and learn today, and we will adjust our formula as needed to maybe lessen the sting. But I can't retreat from the tax swap itself. We must reason together. I know it's not easy, and there will be some sacrifices, but we must look to the future with confidence. And I pledge today that I will work with City Council to ensure that our neediest senior citizens are not hurt in that process. This was a very tough decision for me to make, but one I knew I had to make if the city is going to survive and grow. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
After Mayor Masloff spoke, angry seniors got up and blasted the wage for property tax swap, the mayor, council, and government in general. They had very little to say other than the fact that they hated property tax, but still the effect on council was chilling.
Luongo. I live at 1402 Woodbine Street, Stanton Heights, 10th Ward. Thank you for allowing me to come here today to express the opinions of many senior citizens who have called me when they heard and read about the tax swap, tax increase, call it whatever you want, it's taxes to them. They couldn't, for one thing, they cannot understand how so many intelligent people who were running for office didn't know before voting day that taxes were going to be raised or changed. They feel they've been cheated and lied to.
We encourage young people to move into the city, but not at the expense of us who are on pension and have paid our dues. Maybe some of you people don't understand the battle we have with the federal government, with the state government, and I'm talking about the Notch babies issue.
In closing, I would like to remind you that to own our own home has always been the American dream. Let's not, through exorbitant taxation, turn this dream into an American nightmare. Thank you for your patience.
I had not planned on working after 65. Seems to me that I'm going to have to get out here and find me something to do. I cannot meet my obligations. And you young people sitting here at this table here don't know what it is to be insulted because you're 65. You don't know what it is to have your dignity stepped on because you're 65. It's a shame what we have to go through in order to eke out a pittance of living, decent living, in order to keep your head above water.
You're working, and you're young, and you're all passing the taxes on to the senior citizen that has worked all their life, as this lady said, and made Pittsburgh what it is. I may talk Southern, but I've been up here ever since I was in 1950. So I do know Pittsburgh. Is this the example that you want to pass on to our younger people? Pass the taxes to the retired elderly who can't move. They don't have enough money to move and are having to live in their homes and want to live in their homes with dignity. Remember, young people, if there's any here, I don't see any, only the council members, when you move into Pittsburgh to live, this is the treatment you receive when you get old and you retire.
However, I'm here because I feel so strongly about the harm that this proposal can inflict on the poor. I have an envelope here that contains the signatures of almost 500 city residents who oppose this ill-conceived and misnamed swap tax. For the most part, those who signed this petition are senior citizens who are angry, bitter, disillusioned, and they are also consistent voters. We have almost 500 reasons to say no to Sophie.
And I think this is a disgrace, the crucifixion to the old people, to take the tax off the young people, the yuppies, and put it on us old people. You ride around in your BMWs and your designer clothes, and we go to this market, we can't hardly eat.
My name is Sam Valiceni. I'm from Sheridan. I live at 3055 Merwin Avenue, Pittsburgh 15204. I'm a homeowner also. The senior citizens have been victimized again, this time by the mayor of Pittsburgh with the proposed trade-off taxes, the 5/8% reduction of wage tax and a 10 mil increase on land and buildings. In the next few days or weeks, the city council will have to vote on this issue. The greatest thing that has happened in the city is the city council election by district. You can be sure that the seniors of Pittsburgh will be watching your reaction on this matter. Let the chips fall wherever you like. We shall remember this at the new council election. Thanks.
The next speaker is Mr. Stuart Arnheim. Is Mr. Stuart Arnheim here? Oh, he should be able to hear us out there. We'll skip Mr. Arnheim and go to Mr. Tom McCune.
Major real estate interests also testified that raising property tax while lowering wage tax would drive people out of the city. However, when they gave their own home addresses, we found that they had already chosen to live in suburban communities themselves, where wage taxes are lower and property taxes are higher.
I'm Thomas McCune, president of the Building Owners and Managers Association and general manager of Gateway Center, which is partially owned by Equitable Real Estate and managed by Equitable Real Estate.
Sir, your home
My
address.
address is 1 Gateway Center. Good morning. I do not live in the city of Pittsburgh.
My name is Michael Sully. I am the 1990 president for the Greater Pittsburgh Board of Realtors. We have a membership of over 3,200 members. Many of our members sell homes in the city of Pittsburgh. Our organization has an obligation and an opportunity to act on behalf...
Excuse me, sir. Your home address.
Oh, 187 Morrison Drive.
Where?
Mount Lebanon. Mount Lebanon. I was born and raised in the city. I moved out of the city 3 years ago. But again, I'm representing my organization, the Greater Pittsburgh Board of Realtors. We believe that we are the watchdog of all real property owners, and we oppose Mayor Masloff's 10 mil increase. We believe that the property owners of this city will be saddled with an unjust share of Pittsburgh's taxes. The mayor's proposal is not a solution to the city's woes. It is a shifting of the problem. This is not responsible government at work. And we believe that a dangerous precedent is being set. Is this what the city's residents can expect in the future from the mayor's office and maybe city council? A tax swap is not the answer. It is an acknowledgement by government that they have run out of possible solutions, and the decision has been made to swap problems. What in the world is everyone trying to do to the senior citizen? Force us into poverty? So please, for the sake of all residents of the city of Pittsburgh, particularly the senior residents, do not let this bill go through. Thank you.
Mr. Shuley.
He's using you to get out of paying his fair share.
It's been very informative. I'm Jim Dawson. I'm just the chairman. I'm Jim Dawson. I'm Senior Vice President with John Galbraith Company at 500 Grant Street, and I want to speak regarding the opposition to the tax swap.
Sir, you live where?
I live at 20 Vernon Drive in Mount Lebanon.
Okay.
People looking at Pittsburgh, wanting to come to Pittsburgh, they drive through the tunnel and they're paying an average of $1.02 per square foot for taxes. So we're looking at $2.54 for the downtown building average versus $1.02. It's significant figure differential, and a firm coming here says, I'll go to O'Hara, I'll go to Green Tree, I'll go to some other location. I think the other thing that is often viewed is that the taxes that are being assessed against the land and building are going to the owners. As an example, Mellon Bank, and an example, Equitable. These taxes, yes, they do pay a share, but they are passed on to the tenants. The tenants then look at this and they look at their numbers and say to them, when their leases come up, I frankly are not going to renew and take that kind of tax hit. I'll move to Green Tree, Moon Township, elsewhere. Just in absolute numbers, the Gateway Center tax increase with this tax swap would be in excess of $500,000. The tax increase to the Mellon properties would be in excess of $770,000 for downtown. And again, they're not just falling on to Equitable or to Mellon, they're falling on to the tenants of those buildings. I can assure you that we are at the limit. As Tom McEwen had said earlier, we are at an 83% occupancy level downtown. Quite frankly, that again is a soft number.
Before we could respond, combined pressure from angry seniors and powerful real estate interests prompted one council member to declare that she and several others opposed the swap, and she tried to adjourn the hearing.
Opinion.
But it's important that the people understand we've not had a chance to respond how we feel.
Councilwoman Madoff, you're out of order. We are here.
I'm not out of order, am I? We're not going to vote for it the way it is.
Ladies and gentlemen,
on this point of order, Mr. Chairman, I believe the intent is not to go ahead with the hearing. We have a responsibility to hear everybody here, whether it's pro, con.
Not our hearing, this is your hearing. And we are here to listen to your opinions, and I will not entertain any motion from Councilwoman Madoff or anyone else to adjourn this hearing. Sir, you have the floor.
Yes. My name is Stephen Cord, and my address is 6167 Landfair in Columbia, Maryland. I may be getting the award for coming the furthest distance. I have, however, been the president...
Excuse me, sir. Point of order. We need silence in this room, and it needs to begin at this table. Sir, you have the floor.
I have been a student of Pittsburgh's unique property tax for over 30 years. First as a professor for 25 years at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, and now as president of the Henry George Foundation of America, which was started here in Pittsburgh in 1926. I'm also editor of a publication which goes to many of you people called Incentive Taxation. And we have done studies on the property tax here in Pittsburgh. And I should tell you, first of all, that Pittsburgh is known the world over for its unique property tax. I'm talking about your two-rate graded property tax. I just came back, well, a few months now, from Australia, and they all know about Pittsburgh. And I think they know more about Pittsburgh than maybe some people in Pittsburgh do. Particularly, they like the unique property tax that you folks have. One reason why that property tax is good, there are two reasons. One is it helps the elderly, and the other is that it promotes economic development in this city. We have done a study, and I'd be delighted to send this to any one of you. It came out in 1982. Which shows that after Pittsburgh started to tax land more than buildings, construction in this city in the 3-year period following that change increased 4 times. That's a lot, 4 times, over what it had been in the prior period, the prior 3-year period. Now,
you folks have the opportunity of having your cake and eat it. It's not often that that can be done, but you can do it with the two-rate property tax that you have. If you were to put, it's nice that you can reduce the wage tax. There isn't anyone, even in this room, who would like to see a high wage tax. We all want that reduced, but not at the sake of the elderly. Well, all right, there's a way out. Instead of putting the increased tax burden on property, that is to say on buildings and on land, put it only on land. If you have a building to land tax shift, most homeowners, and I have studies here, but just too many to believe. I mean, look at all these studies I got over the years, and many of them funded by the City Council of Pittsburgh, which show that homeowners pay less, and particularly elderly homeowners pay less. So my proposal to you, and that of the organization I represent, which still has many members in Pittsburgh, that you put the entire burden not on buildings and on land, but on land only. And that you shift the taxes not from wages to property, but from wages to land instead. And that would require a 208 mil tax rate on land assessments, which are not even 25% of market value as they ought to be. Plus, and that would enable you to keep the tax rate on buildings the way it is now. 208, 27, and that's the burden of my message. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker is Mr. Dan Sullivan.
Hello, my name is Dan Sullivan. I live at 633 Melwood Avenue, Pittsburgh 15213. I am the only person testifying in a three-piece suit who does not live in Mount Lebanon. And I think that calls attention to the fact that people vote politically and they vote economically, and a lot of people have voted with their feet to leave the city. I live in the city. I don't make that much money. I got this. I wore this for my wedding, and I'm wearing it again here. Most of you know me coming in here and they're saying, why are you coming to city council dressed like that? But I figured today I would point out that the clothing is deceiving, and that the term elderly poor property owner is deceiving. Most of the people here are elderly on fixed incomes. They may not be poor, but they're not affluent. And most of the people here have a property and they take real good care of it. Somebody caught me right out here in the hall the other day and was talking about she was tired of paying money to the gas company, so she put all new windows in her house to keep the draft from leaking so she'd have a lower gas bill. And they reassessed her property because she improved it, and now she's paying less money to the gas company and more money to the city of Pittsburgh. And I guess you'll do better with the money than the gas company will, but it's kind of a wash for her. And with that in mind, I would like to point out that the true elderly poor property owner would do much better if you didn't tax their improvements. Now, we have another kind of elderly poor property owner. They live in Mount Lebanon. They're not elderly and they're not poor, but they own property in the city of Pittsburgh, and the property they own is elderly and it's poor. And when you protect the elderly poor property owner, make sure you're protecting the elderly poor person who lives in the city of Pittsburgh and depends on their little property, and you're not protecting the person who lives out of the city and owns 37 acres of vacant land on the Strip, or the guy who wants the government to build an expressway to his slag dump in Squirrel Hill so he can build a shopping center, or the people who got the taxpayer to spend money to build Station Square. If we didn't take care of those elderly poor property owners who are rich and own this elderly poor property, we wouldn't have as much trouble taking care of these elderly poor property owners. If we took the tax, as we've been advocating year after year after year, we kept taking the tax off the buildings and putting it on the land, most of these elderly poor property owners would get their taxes reduced so much that we could lower the wage tax, put it back up on land, they'd still come out where they are now. If we took the 27 mills off of buildings, put it on land, and then put a little more on land to get rid of the wage tax, most of the people here who have modest properties and who fix them up would do quite well.
And some of the people testifying who are not wearing three-piece suits are not the poor property owners. So that's the only thing I wanted to point out. The thing about the wage tax, I don't think it has to go much lower, much faster. Getting it under 3% is very important. People are not bean counters. Most people don't know whether the property tax is higher in Crafton or Carnegie. It's not 1% everywhere else. It's 1% most places. Some are 1.5%, some are 2%. McKeesport and Mount Oliver, if you lower the wage tax 5/8%, will be higher than the city of Pittsburgh. You will no longer be the highest. You will no longer be over 3%, and you shouldn't get this reputation of everybody talking about the wage tax all the time. That hurts you more than the wage tax itself hurts you. People, apartment owners have talked to me and they've said, people walk into my apartment building, they live right near the border, they think they're in Greentree. They find out that they're in the city of Pittsburgh and they're going to pay a wage tax. He says, wait a minute, my rent is so much lower than the rent in Greentree that unless you make $40,000 or $50,000 a year, it's a better deal to live in the city. But people don't think that way. They're not counting. The people here haven't figured out how much their taxes are going to increase. Most of the people here didn't say, my taxes are going to go up $47.15. You know, they just know it's going to go up. And they're not bean counters, and if you do the bean counting, you find out that if you put it on land, it's a lot better for the elderly than if you put it on property. And if you would take it off of property, what's already there, and put that on land too, most of these people would be paying less taxes than they're paying today and would still have a lower wage tax. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, thank you, Dan.
Also testifying for land value tax were two city council candidates whom we had actively supported in the 1989 elections, Jonathan Robeson and Mary Caroline Hunt.
Apropos to the balance of taxes we're now discussing, I support an increase in land tax, and only on land, for one major overall reason. An increase in land tax will encourage development, particularly on undeveloped land and underdeveloped land. It will be a new source of revenue instead of shuffling the money we already have collected. I am one who will pay more under that plan, under a new land tax. But I believe that in the long term, the long-run health of Pittsburgh, that this will be of benefit to all of us. An increase in land tax will increase or will discourage land banking, which creates an apparent underassessment of land which could be developed by private money. A good example has been mentioned already, the Strip District. An increase in land tax will encourage turnover, which increases city revenues through the transfer tax. It will also encourage quicker development of land so that land will become income developing to convey higher land tax. Increased construction for development of land will bring wages. It will bring new jobs in the new businesses, in the new buildings, which generates wage tax, business privilege tax, higher real estate tax on the improvements. New construction can also provide new housing for new wage earners. We must make more efficient use of the money we have already collected, work to lower our costs of city government, because the long-term new revenues are where we need to focus. New revenues can reduce the total tax bite of all Pittsburghers. Thank you.
I join with those who support reducing the wage tax and switching it to land, not to buildings, not to improvements. I believe that this will have much less impact on the senior citizens, which are obviously so concerned. As it happens, my wife and I would pay more from a switch to land than a switch to land and buildings, because our street is zoned for high-rise apartments, 9 stories. Therefore, it's valuable land, therefore we would pay more. Most people, however, would pay less. Why is this? Because a building tax punishes people who are not investors and landowners, but who are homeowners, who have been carefully maintaining their homes and the value of their homes for years, for decades, like most of the people here. The land tax falls most heavily on speculators, on owners of slum property or vacant property. Let me give you an example on my street, 248 North Dithridge. I used to live there until recently with, our family was one of the 6 apartments in that house. That house was bought by a developer, a responsible developer, not a fly-by-night character. That development company is planning in 5 or 10 years, no sooner, to build a high-rise of some kind. Meanwhile, that house and the vacant property next door are vacant. For a year and a half, they've been vacant. It'll be vacant for at least another 5 years. A higher land tax would encourage the owner of that property to use it. That house is still livable. Provide housing for people who live in it. And the odd thing about a land tax is that it would tend to decrease the price of land and rents. Why? I'm a landlord. I have 2 apartments on the ground floor of our house and some fine tenants that are helping us pay our mortgage. The rent I charge is determined not by my costs, but by what the market will bear. And if there's more housing available, like 248 up the street, I can't increase my rents, or I'll have vacant apartments which pay no rent at all. So ironically, the land tax will not increase rents. It is likely to decrease them.
Thank you, sir. Randy Zotter.
We also got unexpected support from people we had talked to years ago. City Council candidate Mary Lou Daniel, community activist William Smith, and Randy Zotter, a local real estate agent.
Are losing population in this city. And I'm appalled. I'm a licensed real estate agent. I have sold millions of dollars worth of property over the past several years. And I am appalled that the president of the Board of Realtors would stand up here living in Mount Lebanon and tell you about raising taxes in the city of Pittsburgh. First of all, there are probably 3,000 to 4,000 licensed real estate agents in the area, the suburban Pittsburgh area, and they will not sell real estate in the city of Pittsburgh. Number one, it's not worth as much money in the suburbs. I have met countless people who have transferred into this area from other cities, other states, who have said, gee, Randy, we love this Mexican War Street area. We love the South Side. But our real estate agent wouldn't show us that area. They showed us Fox Chapel, Mount Lebanon. And you run into these people, and I've had dozens of people buy property in the suburbs, and when I said to them, why don't you live on the South Side? Why don't you restore a home on the North Side? They looked me square in the eye and said, we don't want to pay a 4% wage tax or a 2 5/8% wage tax. And the problem is not the wage tax, it's the perception of the wage tax.
Let's move on then to Mary Lou Daniel. Is Mary Lou Daniel here?
Decisions that way. I want you to think about this. And I can speak with authority because I have children I have raised in this city, some of whom have left the state because they're in the military, some because where they went to college. Some of my children have left the city, and some of them will still live here. But think about this. A young family nowadays, a wage earner making about $25,000 a year. This person has 3 kids, and it's tough to buy milk and bread and clothes for these kids on $25,000 a year. It's not easy. Sounds like a lot of money, but it's not. They sit at the desk next to a colleague who is also making $25,000 a year. Only the friend next to them has just bought a house in the suburbs. And every 2 weeks they get their paycheck. And they talk about it because it comes every 2 weeks, and it's a reminder. Every 2 weeks I see this pay stub. And the guy sitting next to him, who's making the same amount of money, has $2.40 deducted from his pay. And this person who lives in the city, who's thinking about buying a house, gets $8.41 deducted from his pay. And every 2 weeks when he looks at that, he says, that $6 could buy 3 gallons of milk, 5 loaves of bread, would be a part of a pair of shoes for my kids, and that's how he makes his decision on where to live. We have to think about those families, those people, and we've got to keep them here. This is the way to do it. I hope you support this plan, because we have got to find those people. And Randy Zotter told you just a few minutes ago about realtors, real estate agents who will not show houses in the city. I want to tell you that just 3 weeks ago, I was in a meeting on the north side, hosted by a neighborhood organization, 4 real estate agents, so that they could show them the community to encourage them to sell houses in that neighborhood. And a gentleman walked in who stood up and said, I tried to buy a house in this neighborhood, and I talked to 6 real estate agents who would not show me a house here, who kept taking me to Ross Township because I didn't have to pay the 4% out there.
I would propose that the taxes in the city would be increased on land, especially if there's a way of implementing a 2-tiered system, taxes on vacant properties. What we have in a lot of communities, and as I look around the room, I'll bet that there is a community in each district in which there are properties that are left vacant, properties that are bought, speculators are moving in, buying 6, 7 properties, and they're not building. That doesn't help the stability of the various communities within the city. And if that is not going to be an effort, then I don't think that people should be able to come in and speculate to the point where they are a detriment to our communities.
At the end of the public hearing, top city administrators discussed the issue with City Council. It was the first time anyone from the mayor's office has publicly supported land value tax.
On that. Some 3 hours ago, if you remember, Councilman, there were 3 gentlemen here, or 2 gentlemen and somebody else, representing the commercial real estate industry. And they, too, were opposed to any increase of any type on the real estate tax. All 3 of them lived outside of the city, I believe. None of them paid the wage tax. One fellow from Mount Lebanon, if you'll recall, hid behind the very, very legitimate concerns expressed by these people in order to protect his business interests in terms of not having to pay more tax. This is the classic case of the non-city resident abusing the goodwill, services, and in this case, pocketbooks of these folks for their own benefit. As part of the solution, we are looking for a way to make certain that those interests also pay their fair share. So when you're talking about the swap as it was first proposed, 40% of that increase comes from additional commercial real estate interests. I don't want to lose sight of that, because I also don't want to lose that potential revenue, because that's 40% of a tax these people don't have to pay.
Well, Pittsburgh is somewhat unusual in having a split assessment system and a split millage. That's very unusual. If we were a combined millage the way most of the rest of the world, this would be a standard 10 mil increase, as was initially proposed. Given the fact that the building assessments are so much higher than the land assessments, in order to the extent that you want to reduce building and increase the land assessment, what you have there is basically for every mill of building you reduce, you need to increase the land by approximately 4.5 in order to get the same dollar value. So 10 mills on land and 10 mills on building bring the same amount of funds as 5 on building and 33 on land. The reason why that has benefit to the seniors, and I know, Councilman, you've run some numbers, and I've run some numbers, and I've been out and talked with the seniors about it, is that as a general rule, I guess in two ways. First of all, vacant land would then be picking up a share of the increase, a larger share of the increase, which would benefit basically all other property owners, homeowners. And then secondly, what you tend to find, and our analyses indicate the same as yours, is that senior citizens tend to be tend to have homes that are less land intensive. In other words, young families want room and yards and areas, and as you grow older, you tend to go into homes that are less land intensive. So there is a benefit in general to the senior citizens by shifting away from building to the land, and that's what our surveys have shown us.
1 week later, City Council unanimously passed a 5/8% reduction in the wage tax to be made up by a 5 mil increase on buildings and a 33 mil increase on land. After the vote, we asked 2 council members what we need to do in order to win bigger victories in the future, Councilman Michael Coyne and Council President Jack Wagner.
I think what we have to do is we have to make sure that the return is there on our investment. And the more you can prove that, the more you can prove by putting more tax on land and enhance development projects or cause them to occur, the greater potential of more of that happening. Obviously, a lot of people, including yourself, Dan, had lobbied for that for years. And I think in the lobbying of it, there was a lot of education that went on. And certainly I think yourself and others helped to educate people in elected office as to the benefits of doing that. And sometimes things don't happen overnight. It takes time, and generally speaking, they happen as a result of a need. And the need here was more to reduce a wage tax and to find a way to accomplish that. So I think there's a multitude of reasons why, but I think generally speaking, it's proof, verifying that it works, trying it out initially, and simply giving it a chance. And that was done 10 or 12 years ago. It worked, and it was done again, and it worked again.
Well, it was my opinion, since getting on council and viewing the entire issue of taxation in light of the concept, I guess, of the land tax, is that city governments and governments throughout the country, I think, need to start moving in that direction more. The tax proposal that came from the administration seemed to go partially in that direction, but I didn't think really was enough. You know, one of the problems we have in the city are, we say that the people in the suburbs don't pay enough into our taxes. We get $10 a year occupation tax. But a lot of the people who live in the suburbs do own vacant lots. And they're a hassle to a neighborhood because a lot of times the lot isn't cleaned up. They're a hassle to the city because we have to go through enforcement processes. So, after looking at the entire issue, I thought maybe, and I still feel that way, that the city needs to put more emphasis on the tax of land rather than just building or wages. So it was my initial position to stand for that and to see what what we could do to enact that.
How did you get to be in touch with land taxes?
Well, I first became, I guess, aware of land tax through your efforts. When I got on council, you did come around, we met, and you explained the concept and said it wasn't a new idea. When you first came to me, I thought it was something that, hey, this is pretty original and pretty smart guy here. But you went on to explain that, it's a concept that's been around for a while, and one that has been, has looked attractive to many people, but I don't think enough of a selling job has been done to the general public. I mean, the people who this really affects are as you were saying earlier, the small homeowners. people who have a small house but are getting taxed the same for having a constructive building or doing something productive with their land, opposed to someone who just has a vacant lot and isn't doing anything. And you know, having brought that to my attention, and I know Representative Coyne has been a proponent of this whole idea, you know, I thought it was a very good concept. And when you said it, you know, I know you had Councilman Lyons with the last term, I'm pretty sure was a proponent of this idea. And I think it's something the city needs to look at. But I think that, again, it needs to go back to the idea of selling it to the average person. You know, a lot of times government doesn't move unless it gets kicked. And, you know, if things seem to be moving progressively and things are moving smoothly, well, that's fine. I don't think you're going to see the system shift. But if the individual homeowner starts realizing that, hey, wait, I'm paying X amount of more taxes for having something nice on my property than this man is or this person is for not, I think you're going to see more of a grassroots, you know, upswing of pushing for this whole concept, and maybe government then will you know, get in the right step on it.
But do you see what would make a typical politician reluctant, and do you see things that would make a typical politician overcome that reluctance and be more confident?
Well, I think the reluctance on anyone's part to introduce it lie in two areas. One is, as I said initially, it is seen as a new concept, and a lot of times people are standoffish with coming up with something new. I think that once you get across the idea that it isn't new, that it's been around, that look at the figures, look how the regular citizen can benefit and how it can help your constituents, then you're going to see more people stepping forward to, if not to want to introduce, to be involved. Then your second hurdle, as I see it, are from people who own a lot of the vacant property, who a lot of times, as I'm sure you know, are contributors to campaigns, are people who, you know, are waiting for the value of a property to shoot up higher. You know, I own a vacant lot in a strip district, and you know, I know in the future something's going to go there. So it's to my benefit to keep the property as low as possible and then sell it and make more of a profit. So I think the two hurdles you're going to encounter are the one, getting it accepted by the public, and the second one is going to be the people who have a great deal of money, who own the property, who are going to give you some political resistance or veiled threats possibly, as to if you come up with this radical idea, it's going to hurt me and my business, and it's not going to help. It's not going to help your region, because if you're taking more money away from me, I'm not going to have as much money to invest back in the area. You know, and that does carry a lot of weight. I mean, you know, on an objective point of view, if you're telling me I hope to do this and this is going to create 500 jobs, but you're hurting me, and if you hurt me, I'm not going to be able to do this, that is something you need to consider. But a lot of times, I think it's just a way for some individuals to save a buck themselves and not really pull their fair share with the amount of property they own. And there again, I think it goes back to the idea of selling it to the regular average person, saying that, you know, you're the one that is getting shortchanged in this deal, and they're the ones that vote. I mean, when it comes down to it, a politician's final decision has to be, you know, once you go through, if it's a moral issue or whatever, and you take your stand, is it an issue that you're willing to win or lose votes over? And I think, you know, that's what your average politician is going to look at. What do I stand to gain or lose from this? What do my constituents stand or to gain or lose from it? And if he or she views it as an issue that may be unpopular with a few, but when properly understood is popular with a great deal of people, then that individual will make a vote or will be more willing to sponsor legislation that will call for this change.
Over the past 2 years, we have been selling our ideas more to the public. Besides participating in 2 city council campaigns, we have applied land tax principles to other issues, such as unwanted housing projects in Sheridan and an unwanted parking authority garage in Shadyside.
We object to the City of Pittsburgh subsidizing the proposed parking garage. This proposal is nothing less than a gift from Pittsburgh taxpayers to a few landowners. Walnut Street landlords already enjoy skyrocketing rents, and they can easily afford to build their own garages with their own money. It is wrong for them to ask tenants or taxpayers to build one for them. Nobody pays rent like a Walnut Street merchant. The Mardi Gras rents have increased 7.5 times since the parking lots were built. Brendan's was paying $4,000 a month and was willing to pay $8,000, but their landlord refused to renew their lease. Several merchants are paying $8,000 a month. Another merchant is leaving rather than pay triple his previous rent. A parking garage would help landlords attract even more chain stores and charge even higher rents. What happened? Why is it that we haven't had private housing? Why is it that some homeowners, or property owners, particularly those in Sheridan, have chosen to build and maintain their own housing, work hard for a living, and take whatever property they can get and do their level best to make the most they can of it? And why is it that other property owners, particularly people who own property that they don't live in, have bought property that they don't use, that they don't maintain, that they don't develop, that eventually gets neglected and leads to a shorting of housing? Now, these people here are already robbed by a system that taxes them higher because they have buildings and they have improvements and they maintain them, and we tax that. And it taxes them higher because they work, and we have a 4% wage tax. And the owners of run-down vacant properties don't have much improvement tax because they don't improve it much. And they don't have much wage tax because they don't earn wages for a living and they don't live in the city. They just get the rent sent to them, what's left of it, when the property deteriorates. Out in places, statistically, it turns out to be places like Fox Chapel, Sewickley Heights, Thornburg, Mount Lebanon, and in the city, Squirrel Hill. Now, these citizens who are already being overtaxed just because that's the way we run the taxes, get taxed a little more so we can take taxpayers' money and give it to the people who have not developed their properties, have not maintained their properties, so that the housing authority can buy it from them. So the housing authority, at the taxpayer's expense, is like an insurance company for the people who run down their property. The housing authority and the URA both. Now, Sheridan's working homeowners did not contribute to poverty and homelessness in any way. They have taken for themselves these modest pieces of property, worked hard to make that property valuable. And they worked at their jobs and produced wealth that their employers distribute, so it's good for the economy. Those in this area who are self-employed tend to have small businesses that hire people, so they are responsible for pulling people out of poverty. These are not people who make their livings at the expense of the community. These are people who the community lives off of. And they are being asked, or rather forced, because they haven't been asked, to see the quality of their neighborhood and the value of their property endangered by the implantation of low-income housing. Taking insult with injury, they have been called racists and bigots for saying openly what everyone knows to be true, that people who are economically deprived end up eventually becoming morally, socially, and culturally deprived as well. And that dealing with these people is a burden that the residents of Sheridan and working-class communities like Sheridan do not particularly deserve. Sheridan residents are reminded, and this is true, that poverty is everybody's problem, and that Sheridan is only one of many neighborhoods that will eventually have scattered site housing. But that's not quite true, because not everybody caused this problem, and not everybody will be asked to suffer the consequences. Those who did cause this problem, those who bought real estate for which they had no sound development plans, those who held property off the market and let it deteriorate and held back our economic growth, tend not to live in places like Sheridan. The places that they live in, I already mentioned. And the character of these Sheridan people is such that it's not unreasonable for them to ask, how much low-income housing is scheduled for Thornburg, Fox Chapel, Sewickley Heights, and in the city of Squirrel Hill? The anger of these Sheridan residents does not come from hatred of the poor. It comes from the realization that somehow they are being robbed. It is anger that is directed not so much at idle poor who are victims of the problem and who symbolize the problem, but at the idle rich who have caused the problem, who profit from the problem, and who are insulated from the consequences of the problem. It is an anger at a government, and I'm not talking about this city council or one government. It's an anger at all units of government that continually play the very poor against the less poor, that tells the very poor that their survival is endangered because the less poor are stingy with their taxes and stingy with their land. And the less poor are being told that they must see their pockets, I'll be off real quick, picked
because their neighborhoods harmed because they can't take care of themselves. This is a charade that conceals the fact that more and more tax money and more land is ending up in the hands of fewer and fewer people, and that we are really taking from the working poor and giving to the rich on behalf of the really poor.
Speaking at hearings still isn't enough. To find out what we could do next, we interviewed attorney John Robeson. Robeson has been a leader on Pittsburgh community issues for over 20 years. Just on the millage question, what do we need to do in terms of nuts and bolts to build an organization around the issues that we have? What work needs to be done? What's it take in terms of money? What's it take in terms of people and talent?
I think you would need ideally an administrative person and a couple of door-to-door workers who are actually going to go the rounds, both coordinate efforts to bring in community leaders and community activists, and also, do the door-to-door work as far as signing people, not only getting people to sign petitions, but getting people out to meetings, getting people out to demand local legislation and so on. And I think this is an issue where the elected officials would respond to pressure.